Om. Om. Sahana vavatu. Sahanau bhunaktu. Saha viryam karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. We shall chant chapter 4 of the Gita from verses 31 till the end. Yajñashishtamrita bhujaha yanti brahma sanatanam nayam lokostya yajñasya kutonya kuru sattama evam bahuvidha yajñaha vitata brahmano mukhe karma jan vidhitan sarvan jna evam jnatva vimokshase shreyan dravyamaya yajñat jnana yajñah parantapa sarvam karmakhilam partha jnane parisamapyate tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninastatvadarshinaha ajñatva na punarmoham yevam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanyasheshena Drakshyasyatmanyato mayi api chedasi papebhyah sarvebhyah papakrittamaha sarvam jnanalpavenaiva vrajinam santarishyasi yathaidhamsi samidhognihi bhasmasat kuruterjuna Jnanagnih sarvakarmani bhasmasat kurute tatha nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitramiha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatpara sanyatendriyaha jnanam labdhva param shantim nachirenadhigacchati ajñascha shraddhadhanascha samshayatma vinashyati Nayam lokosti na paraha na sukham samshayatmanaha yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana samchinna samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibadhnanti dhananjaya तस्मादज्ञानसम्भूतं हृत्स्थं ज्ञानासिनात्मनः चित्वैनं संशयं योगम् आतिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत Today, before I get on to the text where we would be starting the verse 38, I have received a couple of clarifications or questions in the group inquiring what is a Vedantic perspective, or how does Vedanta perceive the whole concept of euthanasia. Am I clear and audible to you all? The whole concept of how Vedanta approaches euthanasia. Now, this was being asked in the context of how would you measure that act, because all what we understand that an action per se is neither good nor bad. It is only the motive or the intention that you carry that justifies the action. So when you look at this concept of euthanasia, which is, as we also would know it as mercy killing, isn't it? Am I right in the understanding? So globally, it has in fact received how to put it, different nations have approached it differently. It is permissible, it is legal in certain countries it's illegal. So it is wrong to do so, and certain countries it's very permissible. But how does Vedanta, from the standpoint of this knowledge, how can we examine this situation? Now, a situation of a person who is in that condition, obviously he loses that freedom of choice. He doesn't have that free will anymore to take a certain decision on the course of his future, whether to live the same journey thereafter, or should he end his life for whatever reason. So it is the call to be taken by the well-wishers or by the medical practitioners or doctors. Now, purely going by the advice given by the doctors that there is no further hope for a person to recover from his current medical condition, if that is a certain guarantee that there is no hope, because everything thrives on hope, everything sustains on hope, and we all want to perhaps even challenge that hope and say there is a hope beyond that hope, that things will come back to normal. However fair, however genuine your intention is, you have to accept the reality of life. When doctors say that there is no further hope for that person to recover from that state, and thereafter, whether you are acting on it or not is just a concept, because it's too much for us to discuss it in terms of a possibility. Here we only have to understand it theoretically, how it functions. So if you are in a position where you have to take a call to say, I think given the factors, we would not want him to go through any further suffering, and all you need to do is do what is needed medically right to be done. From a Vedantic perspective, you wouldn't be committing a sin, considering that there is no other motive hidden behind it. Now, let's say you have some hatred towards that person, or you have some dislike, or you want some huge property he has left behind. It's only going to come to you after he says, he hits the bucket. He says, bye-bye, farewell, never to see you again. And then only you get all that rewards and returns. And then because of that, you do that act. That is certainly a sin. So the only objective of that act that justifies your action is you don't want that person to go any any more in that current condition and to suffer further. And it is that action, if there's 100% pure to its sentiment, you have not committed a sin. One has not committed a sin. So, because when you go into that condition and stay put there, where you're physically non-responsive, maybe to a certain extent you're mentally responsive, or even you're mentally dead. If that be the case, you have literally become like a vegetable, isn't it? And a very great, I think, Lebanese, a German philosopher, whenever I get into these tricky names, I hope I'm pronouncing them correctly. Now, I'm looking at someone in particular. Now, he says, life sleeps in plants. Now, he says, life sleeps in plants, it dreams in an animal, and it wakes in a man or a human. So the expression of life, he says, it sleeps in plants, it dreams in an animal, and it wakes up, it blossoms in a human. So if you were to understand that, all what it says is the expression of life is very, very minimal at the level of a plant. As it evolves into an animal, it starts expressing and it starts blossoming, and it brings the best in terms from a human. So from a human, you have gone down to a level of an animal, of a plant. That's why I said you become like a vegetable. So you have done no wrong with reference to what this Vedantic perspective, whether you have committed a sin. So your guilt will not prick. You have not done any wrong as long as you justify that. I think perhaps that would clarify the concerns or clarifications that were raised. Okay, a couple of comments here. Srimatima is saying, the person himself or herself may opt for this medically assisted death. The family accedes to this, to their wishes. What then? It has happened. What's the concern there? Is it, you're not wrong, isn't it? Does it not clarify what I said? You want to say something? Yes, Ma, you can say now, please.
Okay, yeah. I just wondered about the person herself who wants this. Is she sinning? Is she taking the life that God has given her? Does she have the right to take her own life? Is she sinning? I mean, the family, of course.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you say the person himself or herself have opted for this.
Yeah, yeah. Because she doesn't want to burden the family, and she doesn't want to burden herself.
Now I know of a case as someone known to me. That person comes to me and says, my life has been very demanding, very challenging, and she told me, I tried to commit suicide thrice. And she's sitting in front of me and telling that. Now I ask you, would you think she has done the right thing thus far? So I don't think so. You have to live life. Your life is defined by the choices you make. You understand? Now, when you are conscious, when you have the ability to think and reason, and what makes you believe that your act would make their lives more peaceful and comfortable and better? That's wrong thinking. I don't think, in fact, I would question that thinking. I would question that approach. Here we're talking of a situation where you have become a vegetable, where you have no choice at all. There, then justifiable. But I would question that choice you make, because at every situation or every stage of our lives, we're making choices with the limited amount of intellect or wisdom available to us. And the discretion or the wisdom available is directly measured by how much emotion is interfering with it. If 70% of your emotion is influencing your wisdom, to that extent, I would say it's inversely, not directly proportional, it's inversely proportional. It means your wisdom shrinks to 30% only. Now I am able to take this, analyze the situation you have presented. Now what that person is going through is a huge emotional turmoil. She believes that she is a great curse to the family. She doesn't want the family to go through that enormous pain and suffering. So would she be able to think clearly, reason clearly, because there's a lot of emotion playing a role? So as we say, when emotions, what emotions do is it clouds your thinking and reasoning. So from that perspective, I don't think you can justify that act or the thought. Okay, I hope that clarifies, ma. Okay, got some more comments. Let's see if I can get into it. Hari is asking, what about adding the vasana due to our karma, to our existing baggage, consequences of actions? Yeah, every action has a certain consequence. You will certainly be adding to your consequences of your actions, the karmas. Yes, whatever choices you make, it has a certain consequence, you know. But I see in the next case, prarabdha karma, in case of mercy killing. See, prarabdha, now here is a term perhaps some of you may not be familiar with. Now, prarabdha vasanas, just be little receptive to the idea. Every human being, when they are born with certain vasanas. And vasanas is the fuel that drives our human personality into action. So when a person is born with a certain vasanas, those vasanas with which you're born are termed as prarabdha vasanas. This is a certain terminology. And the best way to understand the prarabdha vasanas are that these are the vasanas which are only exhausted through experience, which suggests that vasanas can also be exhausted through knowledge, through wisdom. Now, we're not getting into that difference. In fact, you and I can't differentiate between what is a prarabdha vasana, what is not a prarabdha vasana. You wouldn't know the difference. All right. Now, what prarabdha vasana also does is it has actually created the longevity of life. It has actually predetermined how long your life is defined, how long you're going to live. Now, just for example, let's say my prarabdha vasana is, I want to, now it is 2020. I want to experience what 2070 would be. If that was my prarabdha vasana, I will live another 45 years or 50 years. Till that happens, till I experience that, and I'll die. So what determines death? It is not mercy killing. It is not determined by accident. It is not determined by COVID. It is not determined by a murder. It is not these gross factors that determine death. It is always the subtle that controls the gross. It is always the vasanas. When you're exhausted with those vasanas, which is the prarabdha vasanas, when they're exhausted, you move on, you take up another embodiment, you die. So death, people are only instrumental. They don't incur any karma. Please understand that. You call this hangman, isn't it? Am I right to call them as hangmen? Do they incur karma day in and day out? They go about doing it. How much karma they must be incurring? Zero karma. No consequences, because they are just doing their duty. They have no axe to grind. They have no motive. They are just doing it. They are told to do it. They do it. As simple as that. So the law of life is just dishing out what I deserve. That's about all. Okay. how does a person take the decision, absolve himself of guilt? Now, I don't understand that question. Can Ushama be given the access? 1 minute, Ushama, I think you have to be given the access. Yeah.
Guruji, in case one of the relatives have taken the decision on behalf of the patient who is suffering, then how does that person absolve himself or herself of the guilt?
Glad you asked that, but I've actually clarified a little earlier. Considering that the person is in no position, he or she has become a vegetable, and there is no scope of recovery from that. So it's medically proven that he is actually dead. It's just that the machines and the medicines are elongating his lifespan. So there is no path of recovery for a person in that state. And when the family takes a decision, a conscious decision to end the suffering, there is no guilt as far as that act is concerned, and that act has no consequence. No? Because you literally become a vegetable. When I go, I wouldn't want to be using this example, but please forgive me for using this example. I go into the garden and I have planted some trees, and there are certain unwanted trees that grow. When I pull them out, am I facing any consequence? Please forgive me for using that example in the context. One has literally become a vegetable. As I said, life just sleeps in plant. There is no awareness, there's no consciousness. No doubt there is a certain life element there, but it is at the very lowest level, and it is not the dignity of a human to go to that level. In fact, all of us go to that level every day. When we go to sleep, don't we? We become a vegetable. When we go into that sleep or tamas, it is acceptable. It's acceptable for us to sleep for 5 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. Some may sleep 10, 12 hours. It's okay. But beyond that, I don't think it's acceptable. You say, Napa, what is this all the time in the bed? You don't get annoyed with people who are all the time, lazing in the bed? It's not acceptable, even in a relative sense, don't we? Everything is bristling with life and activity, and you're still lazing in the bed. Everybody reacts, not acceptable, because that's not the dignity of a human being. Imagine being permanently bedridden. It's not a question of cost. It's not a question of other logistics here. We're talking about, it is not the grace and dignity of a human being. So when that act is done, there is no consequence at all. Okay. Good. Kusuma actually agrees that she also feels it's okay. So I have someone concurring with the thought. Hariji is asking, are we not challenging the cause of a relationship by killing, regardless the reason for killing? No, it's not. We're not killing someone without a rhyme or a reason, Hariji. We are actually taking a lot into consideration before taking such a dynamic decision, a very serious decision, because there is no path to recovery. So it is not without a reason. In fact, it's with all the reason you're taking this act. So we're not. In fact, the cause and effect has mysterious ways and means. Now let's say I go for a walk, and somebody comes and drives into me, and I slip. I'm hit by the vehicle. I fall and I fractured my leg bone, which means I'm bedridden for the next 2 months. Now the person who has come and hit me, I don't even know that person. What has that person got to do with me? Are you with me, Hariji? Has that person got anything to do with me? It could be his reckless act that has caused me to go through an injury where I'm bedridden for next 2 months. I've lost my normalcy of life. But yet, why have I gone through it? It is because of my karma. That person has got no role to play. I am suffering because of my karma. He will pay the price for his reckless action. Please mark the words. Please understand the concept. Everything in life determines by the law of deserving. I get what I deserve. I am going through the suffering of that accident because I deserve it. That person, for his reckless act, He will pay the price. He will pay the consequences. So it's all individualistic. There is no, even if he entertains a motive and intentionally cause me harm, the fact that I'm suffering is my karma. Because of the intention he did, or he did not intend to cause the accident, but because he was watching the phone and he was driving, which is invariably you see nowadays. Most of the times people are seeing the phone and driving. Now, his reckless act, whatever it is, he'll pay the consequences of his action. So we're not challenging the law of cause and effect at all. All right. Alka-ji is commenting, taking your own life when you can live is running away from your karma. It's different from euthanasia. I don't think life is meant to be dealt that way. Life is a beautiful opportunity to experience it. And when you don't know how to experience it, you get into these roadblocks or experience of life. And what is saddening is how shallow a thought, how pitiable the condition is that person can't think that life exists beyond that unit experience. Life can't live beyond that moment. Life is too grand. You can't allow it to shrink to any moment or any experience or any situation. It's too grand. And that's what this knowledge makes us realize and believe, that it's really grand. You don't have to be determined, defined by moments and experiences. So well said, Ma. So I think we have addressed this concept of euthanasia. All right. So hope that clarifies. All right. So let's get on with the text. We'll chant verse 38 twice. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitramiha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitramiha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati. Verily, there is no purifier here like this knowledge. He who is perfected in yoga finds it in the self in time. Kalenatmani vindati. He will find it in his own self. He will find it in time. Means very soon he shall find it. Nahi jnanena sadrusham. Verily, there is no purifier here like this knowledge. So the last set of verses, we have come to the fag end of the chapter 4, verses 38 to 42. The Lord is giving a concluding remark, a concluding advice to gain the wisdom which he has been talking about, which we have been seeing in the past few verses, the past few classes, how he is giving the emphasis on how this knowledge is essential. This wisdom is helpful. Now here he says, this very knowledge, this very wisdom is the supreme purifier. There is no greater purifier here like this knowledge. There is no greater purifier. The purifier of what? The knowledge is the purifier of your own vasanas. The knowledge is the purifier of your desires. Knowledge is the purifier of your mental agitations. The knowledge is the purifier of all your sins. It's a supreme purifier. It purifies of all the impurities. It's like you bring in an air purifier into your home. An air purifier, what does it do? It removes of all the unseen, impure germs and dust particles, doesn't it? But they're very much there. Similarly, this knowledge clears of all those mental agitations and sins that you are experiencing. In fact, you may be, if you are any one of amongst you are lawyers, you will actually pin me down for the last 3 words I said. But I don't know, anyone are lawyers amongst in the group? Because I made a sweeping statement on your behalf. And the statement I made is, everybody is committing sin, I said. All of you are going through the mental agitations and sins. On what basis you say that? Now, it's a very interesting experience. If you look at life from this perspective, you will understand. See, what the phase of life we are going through is, we go through a stage of life which is known as acclimatization. When you get acclimatized to a particular situation or a circumstance, when you get acclimatized, you don't know what state you're in. When you look at these garbage, this garbage pickers, they come in the morning with their vans. Or you go into the slums, either way. Do you think they feel the smell? When you are going for a morning walk and when this garbage vehicle is there, just parked, just collecting the garbage, you almost do pranayama. You fill your lungs and try to jog through the section or somehow hold your breath, because that few moments of breath is so suffocating. I tell you how. And then you say, how those people are bearing that, and they're driving and they're singing and they're talking and they're carrying on with their work as if they're doing, I don't know what. Now, why they're not able to feel the smell is because they're acclimatized to it, conditioned by it. So they do not know anything other than that. So they can't see a contrast or a disparity. Exactly the same way, if your life has been conditioned with these mental agitations and sins and the inner vasanas, if one has led a selfish, self-centered life, there is a certain effect of it does on your state of your mind. Your mind is very restless, you're very agitated, you're full of expectations, you have disappointments, you're all the time pessimistic, you're never happy, you're not contented with life. If one is in that state of mind, they are acclimatized to it. They don't see anything wrong with it. Until you see something beyond it, then the disparity of it creates that freshness of life. So when this knowledge comes, you will start seeing your life from a different perspective. Now, there's an interesting comment. Sethuраmanji says, even those who are doing funeral services in the graveyard, the last journey, those who take the last journey, in fact, if you're near India and if you ever taken that journey to the graveyard, and a fellow who is driving that vehicle, right from the driver to the people who are all doing all the job, it's a day in and day out job for them. It's just another day. So they can't relate to the grief or your sorrow or suffering. Not that they are inhuman, but it's just a part and parcel of their life. Similarly, you and I may not see that sense of what purifying. You may say, oh, everything is fine with my air. I don't need an air purifier. See, I breathe in ethereal air. No. But once you get the purifier, and then if you were to filter, and then you see the amount of dust and dirt that is there, you don't see it. So he says, he who is perfected in yoga, yoga here refers to the spiritual union with the self. Here, yoga is not talking about folding your legs in Padmasana or sitting in Shirsasana or is bending your limbs or is not doing this exercise or that. So please don't qualify it with all the other yogas that are being marketed out there. When the Shastras talk of yoga, it was only one yoga, which is the yoga means the union with the self. That's about all. The Atman, the reality. So he who is established in the thought of the self, for such a person, there is no no further impurities. The purifier, the knowledge, he has perfected, he who is perfected in yoga finds it in time. In time means what? He doesn't qualify it. It is not that easy, nor is it indefinite. It depends on where you are. It depends on how much effort you're putting. But certainly, if you would follow this, you will get there in time. Okay, let's move on. 39. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatpara samyatendriyaha jnanam labdhva param shantim achirenadhigacchati. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatpara samyatendriyaha jnanam labdhva param shantim achirenadhigacchati. He who has Shraddha, in brackets translated as faith, he who has Shraddha, who is devoted, who has subdued the senses, such a person only attains this knowledge. Look at the qualifications. He's giving the 3 disciplines necessary if for one to attain knowledge. So if you don't have these disciplines, you will not attain the wisdom. Understood? Having obtained that knowledge, he ere long gains supreme peace. Ere long. Achirena. How long does it take? Not that long. In the Shastras, they say, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he says, how long does it take for you to realize the self? Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, take a rose petal. Take a rose petal in your hand. I will do a little experiment also. Irungo. Sorry, Bhagavan, I've taken one rose petal of yours. A rose petal. Now, I was not prepared for this, so please forgive me. I am getting all the necessary tools for experimentation. Now, there is a pin. He says, how long does it take for a pin to penetrate through the rose petal? Okay, start counting. Your clock starts now. How long it took? No. I slowed it down for you all to count. But if the actual point of contact, the moment I put it is gone already. And also the needle is rusted also. In spite of that, it just took a fraction of a second. Now, what am I trying to tell here? Ramakrishna ji says, it takes that long to realize the self. It takes that long. How long it takes for a needle to penetrate a petal, rose petal? That long it takes. Long, not long. It's that quick you can get to the self. Provided you are ready for it. Provided. You know, how long it took me to realize that I want to pursue this knowledge. Not knowing that there's something like this exists. Believe me, I did not know that something like this existed. There's something, a path of philosophy. There was this Vedanta. I did not even know the definition of Vedanta or the spelling of Vedanta or Sanatana Dharma. I did not know. At the age of 16, when I first got introduced to a lecture on Gita, also for wrong reasons, not the wrong reason, different reason, not for the sake of philosophy, but for the language. When I went there, it took me that evening, which was an hour. One evening's lecture has changed the entire course of my journey, of my whole life has changed. I never look back after that evening. 30 years, this whole life will be consumed by the fire of this knowledge. Now you may tell me, sir, how is it that you could decide that you would want to pursue this knowledge in one evening? When you went for a wrong purpose, you went for a different reason, suddenly you decided you will do this. I came back home and I told my parents and my friends, I said, I want to do this Vedanta. I said, something gone wrong with you? I never heard this from you. How come all this? The moment you are ready for it, it happens. What do you call that experimentation in colleges? We have done this, isn't it? I think volumetric analysis. You have a beaker and what do you call that? Type it out. I'm not going to do lip reading here. Titration, correct. Titration. Now you have to count the number of drops, and the teacher says, you please count the number of drops. It's a clear solution, another clear solution. It's solution A, solution B. You say count the number of drops it takes for it to turn crystal blue or crystal red, whatever color, red, blue, green. You decide what color you want. The teacher says, please count, and you will count slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 17, 18, 19, 20. And you go back, sir, something is wrong with the thing. It's not happening. Right? How many drops you put? The 20 drop. Put 2 more drops. You go back and slowly control the knob and you put 2 more drops. 21st drop, nothing happens. The 22nd drop, the entire change is there for you to be seen. That is exactly that's happening. Change may not be perceived, but change is happening. So I was at the 21st drop till that evening. That evening, 22nd drop, that last piece of advice that got to me completely changed the course of my life. Exactly that's what Ramakrishna ji is saying. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the great Ramakrishna, says, if you have all the necessary qualifications, how long does it take? Not long. That is what Gita also is saying. Krishna is saying, yeah. He who has what? 3 disciplines, 3 qualities. At the physical level, he says, control your senses. What is the Sanyatendriya, Indriya, senses? Sanyam means one who has control over the senses. You know, what does the word Sanjaya mean? I recently gave one of my students the title Sanjaya. Now that person has to do a lot to fit into that title now. So there was a hidden motive by giving the title Sanjaya. So whenever I call him, I see him, I say, Sanjaya Uvacha. Isn't it? Sanjaya, what does the word Sanjaya mean? One who has conquered himself, one who has Sanjaya. Jaya means victory. Sun here refers to the senses. One who has totally conquered his senses. He was the one who could receive the knowledge. Because Sanjaya is the one who is describing the Gita to the blind king Dhritarashtra. So the transmission, the Doordarshan was happening even those days. The Doordarshan, Sanjaya had the capacity to receive what knowledge Krishna, the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna was being received by Sanjaya and passed on. So who can receive this knowledge? Only one who has conquered his senses at the physical level. You must be able to control your senses. Now, controlling of the senses does not mean sense denial. It doesn't mean you have to deny or deprive yourself of sense contacts and sense perceptions. What does sense control mean? In fact, I would refer you all to please go to the second chapter verses 54 if I'm not wrong, gives you what exactly is self-control. Perhaps another day we'll deal with it in detail. Chapter 2 verse 54 of the Gita, that talks about it. But in brief, what determines self-control? Self-control only says that you are not a slave of your senses, you are a master. Correct? You become a master. So senses don't drive you, you drive the senses. Now we are a slave to all our senses. I think in the great Vidyaranya, in the text, one of the texts, he puts it, he says, he talks of 5 animals which have got a weakness for each particular sense organ. I'm sure some of you have heard it, isn't it? Have you heard this example before? Srimati Ma, you have not heard it? Who of you have heard it? Raise your hand. Oh, don't worry, I'll not ask you questions. 5 animals it talks about, where each animal has got a weakness for a particular sense organ. He says, first, a fish has got a weakness for mouth, for tongue. It gets caught in the bait thrown and it gets killed. An elephant has got a weakness for skin. And the elephants are caught in their season of must. Because it's not easy to catch these huge, bulky, strong creatures. So they're caught in their mating season, which is called must. So they dig huge pits, camouflage them with grass, and these animals go berserk, and then they're caught, having dug in the huge pits. So an elephant has got weakness for skin. A deer has got a weakness for sound. So in the jungle folk, they play the drums to draw the deer in shooting range. They are attracted to the sound. And then they are in the shooting range of their guns or arrows, and then they are shot. So deer has got a weakness for sound. And a moth has got a weakness for sight. Don't you see, they get attracted to that fancy lights. We have in the porch, we have these lights. You keep your doors open, they get attracted to light and get burned by the heat of the light. What sense organ is left? Smell. Jai Shrima, thanks. There are certain bees, there are certain insects that go deep into the flowers to draw the honey. And there are certain carnivorous plants. I know not what they are, unless you know, any one of you know the names, and they become carnivores, so they instantly close and kill them. They get trapped because they have got a weakness for the honey. They go deep into it. So he gives 5 examples of 5 animals. They've got weakness for one particular sense organ, which becomes destructive, destroys them. There's some comment, Rafflesia. So those are the flowers, isn't it? Which kill carnivorous plants. Now, a human being has got weakness for what? Srimati Ma is going all over. She said, all, include everything. Please include whatever is there, whatever is not there, include. We have got a weakness for all the sense organs. May God and be His blessings and Guru's blessings be with us. What chance we have. You have got weakness for tongue, weakness for eyes, weakness for taste, weakness for skin, weakness for smell. Therefore, he says, you better control your senses. So one of the acid tests of being spiritually worthy, am I qualified for the spiritual sadhana? He says, you must control your senses. It's control of sense. Therefore, in the Gita elsewhere, he says, this knowledge, I think we have studied this not long ago in the classes. I don't think some of you may be a part of it, but there is something, Sitharamanji, if there is can get hold of that video, we will share it with them. This knowledge is not designed for those who eat too much or eat too little. This knowledge is not designed for those who sleep too much or sleep too little. I don't know where I said it, but it's very fresh in my memory. We spoke of it recently. So if you eat too much or eat too little, disqualified. You sleep too much or sleep too little, disqualified. So that means you must live a life of the medium, the middle path. Now we all know it, but when it comes to practice, oh, that is different, sir. Knowing is one thing, we know it all, but practice. So you got to have that medium not too much, not too little. So control of your senses at the physical level. He says your mind must be devoted to the higher. Now, when your mind is devoted to the higher, may I ask, what is the effect of devotion of the mind? Okay, now, before we get to that, what is the opposite of devotion? My job is not to inform you. My job is to make you think. That's all my job is. If I've done that, I've done my job well. Here he says your mind has to be devoted. Now my question is, what is the opposite of devotion? Aversion? What is the opposite of devotion? Scattering. That's a new word. I don't know what scattering means. Ramana Garu, what does the word scattering mean, sir? Alkaji says indifference, distraction, spurn, agitation. In fact, okay, now do you know the common denominator of what is the underlying emotion of devotion? You all are right. Scattered mind, okay. Ashraddha, Soumyama says. Now, what is the common, what is the supporting factor? What is the, what did I use the word? What is it that supports devotion? Yeah, Vasantama, what is it that supports devotion?
I think it is gratitude.
Gratitude. So opposite of gratitude is ingratitude, isn't it?
Gratitude.
But we're not talking of gratitude or ingratitude. We're talking of devotion. Devotion, I think the closest, I think all of you have said it rightly, but the closest I would take is for devotion is indifference. That's perhaps the closest that clarifies or conveys the opposite meaning. So to understand devotion better, what is the underlying emotion of devotion? As I said, my job is to make you think. And by thinking, you're developing the intellect. That's all. It's an exercise. We're going through here. What is the underlying emotion of devotion? Hariji says, surrender to the higher. Thinkima, you're right. It is love. So the love and devotion are actually one and the same emotion. Love and devotion are the same emotion. Only thing is the direction. When your emotions are going towards something in par or anything lower to you, you say you love them. Like you only say, I love my house, I love my family, I love my kids, I love my car, I love my work. To a certain extent, you can also say work is on par or above you. But anything on par below you, you love. But the same thing you say, I'm devoted to my parents, I'm devoted to elders, I'm devoted to God, I'm devoted to the Shastras. So the emotion, when it gets elevated to something above you, it is devotion. Now the quality, now we are coming to the verse. He says at the mental level, you must develop what is known as devotion. He says, tat paraha. Be devoted to her. Paraha means higher. Tat, be devoted to that, he says. Now, what is devotion? Why is devotion an important element in the spiritual sadhana? What does devotion do? What is the effect of devotion onto your mind? Rajima, what is the effect of devotion?
You become humble.
Become humble.
Humility, you develop humility.
All right.
And you surrender to a higher knowledge or higher ideal.
Higher knowledge, higher ideal, surrender, you become humble. But what do those, even to extend the question, what do these qualities of surrender, humility do to the mind? What effect does it have on the mind?
You are ready to receive, you're like an empty vessel, we're ready to receive and accept change if it is needed.
All right, accept change, receive. In fact, devotion brings in faith. Wonderful. I'm getting a lot of feedback from you, which is right. In fact, when the element of higher emotion influences you, it calms your mind. The agitations of the mind disappears. The moment the same mind is infested, in fact, the language changes. When it's negative emotion, it says infested. So when negative emotions, okay, can you name a few negative emotions? Can you throw at me? Sedramanji, can you throw some, what are the negative emotions that a human being goes through?
Jealousy.
Jealousy.
Pride.
No, I know you don't have, so therefore you're struggling with it. I know that.
Pride, garvam.
Pride, arrogance, garvam. What are the other emotions? Anybody?
Hatred.
Hatred, envy, attachment, anger, fear. So when you put any one, in fact, not put all, put any one or two into your mind, what does it create in your mind? It creates an anxiety, it creates restlessness, it creates agitation, it creates insecurity. Your personality starts smelling foul. You may say, so what? But you are smelling foul from within. Outside, you may be very charming and presentable. Inside is all gone corrupt, is all gone very polluted. It's very impure. So it is very essential. It's not how you're presentable outside. Your mind must be pure and presentable inside. It must be purified within. So only way you can purify the mind is to cultivate these positive emotions. Therefore, he says you've got to be devoted. So it is paramount that you are devoted to two things in the context of our interaction. You must be devoted to the text. You must be devoted to the custodian of this text. If you are not devoted to the text and the custodian, you become not worthy of receiving this knowledge. Knowledge will not serve you. Very, very important that you understand this. It's not necessary that you express this emotion, please. You may have a love to your spouse, you may have a love to your child, but you don't express that feeling all the time, do you? But you have a genuine love and concern for that child. Sometimes the concern for your child may be cruel at times. You may be trying to discipline the child, but with a lot of love, you want to discipline your child, don't you? So you must have a deep reverence to the knowledge and its custodian. And when you have that, your mind is ready to receive this knowledge, as Rajima said a little earlier, but it embellishes, it purifies the mind of the agitations, all the impurities. Did he not say in the previous verse, it is a supreme purifier. So even before you receive the knowledge, your mind must be worthy, pure. At the mental level, get rid of the negative emotions and cultivate the pure, positive emotions, the feelings of higher emotions. And then at the intellectual level, he says, Shraddhavan, one who has Shraddha. So at the physical level, conquer your senses. At the mental level, cultivate this devotion to the higher. At the intellectual level, you got to have Shraddha. Shraddha, even though translated as faith, there is no English equivalent to Shraddha. That's the reason it is translated as faith. But I would say your spiritual journey begins with faith. But what takes you to the journey, to the end of the journey, is Shraddha. Mark my words, your journey begins with faith, but what takes you to the end of the journey is Shraddha. Now, if you don't, now, I have had students with me who have been for a long, long time. I have had students from the time I have taken to a public platform where I'm sharing this knowledge. I have had students right from there on. They've been right with me for all a long time. They have enormous faith in the Guru. But I don't know whether they have Shraddha. I'm not being specific to anyone. The fact that you are coming so consistently to receive this knowledge from this source, you have to have some faith in me. You have to have some faith in my ability that he is able to do justice to the text. If there is even a slightest of, what is the opposite of faith? Now, please don't say no faith. Huh? For God's sake, I expect better answers from brilliant people like you all. What is the opposite of faith? Now, I think XYZ. Now, who is the XYZ? XYZ, we had to name you because we didn't know your name. For your own sake, not for God's sake, please rename yourself. I'm sure you wouldn't like to be addressed XYZ. Alkaji, I think you seem to be sharing your comments privately to me. So I think you may want to share so everybody sees your lovely comments. So the question I'm asking is, what is the opposite of faith? What's the opposite of faith? Doubt, suspicion, skepticism, or you find a reason to have some kind of a funny, suspicious feeling. Is this fellow real? And there is no reason for you to feel that way, but suddenly your mind starts behaving in a funny way. It's like, even for a relationship to stand, you must have unquestionable faith in each other, isn't it? If the husband comes back and asks the question to wife, where were you this morning at 11:30? And if he asks that with a slight bit of suspicion, finished. It's the foulness in the mind. It's that lack of faith in the partner. It destroys the relationship. So faith begins that journey. And there was a master, a great Pandit, who was talking about this concept of faith in a village. He was giving a pravachan to a small gathering, and he was giving the importance of faith. Maybe he was talking on one of these verses. And there were a couple of ladies who used to, milkmaids, they used to milk the cow and supply the milk to the village and also the neighboring villages. And this village was separated by a river which was very strong current. And the only way to cross that length of the river was through a boat. So there was a boatman, a ferryman who used to ferry people from this side to other. That was his job. So these ladies, these two milkmaids, every day they used to use the boat to ferry themselves to the other side, go to the few villages, distribute milk and come back. That was their job. Day in and day out they used to do that. But that morning when they were passing by, they heard this Pandit talking about the faith. So they eavesdropped. And that message got into their head. And they in their illiterate way, they just got into a conversation. What is this faith? What about it? And they started trying to make sense with their limited understanding. But all what they concluded was, whatever the Pandit said must be true. And if you have faith in it, or if you have faith in anything, it will happen. You have to have faith in the Lord. That's what the theme was. You must have faith in the Almighty, faith in the divine providence. That providence is not preferential. If He can take care of the entire humanity, why will He not take care of me? What have I done to be excluded into His grace? So I am also included into His providence and grace. I must have faith in that. When I have no faith in that, then I must think I must do something about myself to take care of myself. Then I become selfish. I have selfish purposes. But when you have faith in the Almighty, faith in the Lord, faith in the providence, as Shakespeare says, there's a divinity that shapes our ends. There is that divinity. Do you all have faith in that divinity? I have infallible faith. Do you all have it? Shakespeare says that. So these two ladies, the maids, had great faith in the Lord. And for some reason, no sooner after a day or so, they decided to put this faith to test. You know what they decided? They decided, let's cross the river on foot. So they entered the water. And they had such faith in the Lord that their faith took them across to the other side of the shore. And they looked at each other and said, wow. You know what this has done? No, no, no. The river has not separated, please, Hariji. The river was flowing. It is not the magic staff of Moses or the Christ. It's not that. No, the river was flowing, but they waded through that flowing strong current and they reached the other side and they said, congratulate themselves. Oh, we are not wrong. What the Pandit said was absolutely right. That the Lord, the faith, and the benefit of that is we have saved the money also, which we are giving to the boatman every day, going up and down. We have saved a few rupees and multiplied by 30 times in a month. Oh, we have saved substantially, which was a lot for them. For a milkmaid, what is their earnings? Meager earnings. And thereafter, for the next month, they royally walked across the river and came back. Nothing happened to them. And as a true student, they wanted to be grateful to the Pandit. Gratitude. Somebody said gratitude. No? It is an element of a sadhak or a student. If you're not grateful to any source of knowledge, mark my words, they just eavesdropped on what the Pandit was teaching somebody else, but they still wanted to be grateful. They were not sitting in a classroom like this to learn. They just passed by, something came their way, they picked up the idea, they wanted to be grateful. So they went to the Pandit and said, Pandit, we are very grateful to you for the teachings. I never taught anything to you, but we learned. Never mind. We want to offer our dakshina to you. We want to invite you home for a meal. Will you come? I said, by all means, no problem. But only thing is, our house is on the other side of the village, one of the village other side. Do you have any problem? No, I don't have a problem. So they all three go to this shore wanting to get across the river. And for this man was held up on the shore and the ladies just went into the river. And they looked back and said, where is the Pandit? The Pandit is waiting for the boat because of the boat has just gone to the other side. It's taken 10 minutes to come back. Then they said, Pandit, what are you doing? No, no, I am waiting for the boat to come across. What are you doing? We walk across royally. And the story goes, the milkmaid gave a lecture to the Pandit. What is faith? Thereafter. Now, this is the difference between knowing it and living it. If you have faith in that Lord, if you have faith in that reality, you can do anything. And I can tell you, I have unquestionable faith in that divine work. There's nothing mine in it. There's nothing less divine in it. Everything is absolute. All I can do is I can minimize the thought of I and my in it. Let the divinity flow. It's all divine work. So why will he not take it forward? Why should I have any thought that should consume and worry me? I have had no problem with sleep. I have sound sleep every day. And I know people with everything, with all their worries, they have sleepless nights. So my advice to them is just surrender your worries, man. I think there's a similar verse that comes in Bhagavad Gita. We'll soon, when we come to the text next week. But what you must understand is, one thing is to have faith. Now, as I've said, if you heard me a little earlier, I said you all have faith, but you must have Shraddha. Shraddha is one notch, a few notches higher than faith. So Shraddha is not, in fact, Shraddha is an intellectual discipline, a capacity to do something until you go to the very end of it. It is that unswerving capacity. It is that consistency. It is that determination with which you pursue something until you get to the very end of it. So you begin the journey with faith, you conclude your journey with Shraddha. So you must have unquestionable Shraddha. Now, Shraddha for what? I want you to fill the statement here. Shraddha. Now, in our relationship, you must have Shraddha for what? Hope you have not forgotten where we are and what are we doing now. Gayatri Ma, Shraddha for what?
Shraddha for walking the path for self-realization.
My God. Shraddha, the path towards self-realization, to walk. Just because I took the example of the maids walking through the river, you take the example of the walking. Yenama. Now, how would you reach self-realization by walking? But what is the path? What is it that you need to do to get to ultimately realization?
Consistent practice
Consistent practice of what?
of the knowledge and manana, wisdom.
Correct. So what the Shraddha you need is not, as I've said, people have been following me for a long time. That is not what I want. What is the Shraddha you need to apply is Shraddha to having received the knowledge. Hariji, having received the knowledge, you should have the Shraddha to make that knowledge your own. To personalize that knowledge, you must have Shraddha to convert the Jnanam into Vijnanam. Correct. Ashaji correctly says from wisdom to be gained. Alkaji also says Shraddha, that the knowledge that you are imparting is the path that you get me to your goal, to my goal. Correct. It's the same goal. So how to take this piece of advice and convert it into wisdom? And that is the journey of a spiritual seeker, a sadhak. A sadhak converts the knowledge into wisdom. And if you don't have that Shraddha, knowledge will remain as information. It will not be translated into wisdom. Now, I know that there has been a very keen interest by a few. I think it was very keenly initiated by Hariji. He also took the opportunity of speaking to me of his interest to know the concept of reflection. For that benefit, a little document was shared giving you the process of reflection. But I think, Hariji, you have something to say? You want to say something? Just a minute or two we will take. I know we just crossed the time, but just want to hear what his request was. And if you all feel that alike, perhaps we could certainly take up. Hariji? Yes, sir.
To get or to make a couple of case studies, if we take a specific problem, and not necessarily with respect to the verses that we are studying, but life in general, that we make. Say, for example, there may be a mistake which I know that it is a mistake, but I don't want to make that mistake, but I repeat the same mistake not knowingly. And if you ask me, why do I make that mistake? And I don't know. I keep on apologizing. Yes, sorry, I did it. I mean, I think similar type of couple of case studies, if you could take, if everybody is okay with it.
I think it's a very genuine request and a genuine concern of learning, because if we don't understand how the process of reflection is done, if you don't follow the right methodology, you may not get the right rewards, which is the wisdom. So I would actually visit this idea and perhaps have all of you received this piece of document conveying. Perhaps what we will do is I'll request the concerned to share the document after the prayer. We will leave it on so that you can take a snapshot for those of you who have not received it. And if you want to receive it, just I think we will try to reach it out to you via email as well. So the concerned department will ensure you get that document. And perhaps next Sunday, when we come back, because some of you may not be available for the Bhaj Govindam class, when we come back next week, we will spend a little time on trying to understand the intricacies of how the concept of reflection helps us sadhak converting knowledge into wisdom. What is this concept of manana, right? So we will take it up in detail. Okay, Hariji? Right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.